A journey to love and redemption. Under the soft glow of a small-town sunrise, a humble mechanic's garage hums quietly, its walls holding secrets of sorrow and resilience. Jake, the man behind the grease-streaked overalls, has long hidden himself away, haunted by the shadows of his past. But one unexpected moment changes everything: the laughter of a boy, the gratitude of a mother, and a chance at a future he never dared to dream. What unfolds is a journey of healing, courage, and love that defies the odds. As Jake learns to let go of the pain he's carried, Emily and her son Tommy begin to piece together a family neither of them thought possible. Their story is a testament to the power of second chances, the beauty of connection, and the strength found in embracing life again. If you're someone who believes in the magic of human connection and the hope that love can mend even the deepest wounds, then this story is for you. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an inspiring tale like this one. Together, let's explore the extraordinary lives of ordinary people and the moments that change them forever. Now, settle in and let us take you on a heartwarming journey, a story of love found in the unlikeliest of places and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. A poor mechanic risked his life to save a child from an accident, and his life took an unexpected turn. The clang of a wrench echoed through the small-town garage, a sound that had become Jake's constant companion. The garage was modest, a far cry from the high-tech workshops he once commanded as a promising engineer. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through a cracked window, highlighting the oil-streaked floor and shelves lined with worn-out tools. For Jake, this small, secluded space was both a sanctuary and a prison, a place to hide from the world and from memories too painful to confront. Jake wiped his hands on a tattered rag and stepped outside to stretch his back. The summer heat bore down mercilessly, the kind that made the asphalt shimmer like a mirage. He took a long sip from his water bottle, squinting at the quiet street. Life in the small town moved at a predictable pace, much like the rhythm he'd settled into after losing his wife 5 years ago. Suddenly, the distant sound of laughter caught his attention. Across the street, a young boy, no older than 6, was chasing a red ball that had slipped from his grasp. Jake smiled faintly, the innocence of childhood a brief distraction from his own brooding thoughts. The boy's joy, however, quickly turned to panic as the ball rolled onto the main road. Without hesitation, the boy followed it, unaware of the danger barreling toward him. A truck, its horn blaring, came into view. Jake's heart lurched as he dropped his water bottle and sprinted toward the boy. The world seemed to slow down as he reached the child, scooping him up and diving out of harm's way, just as the truck roared past, narrowly missing them both. Jake landed hard on the unforgiving pavement, shielding the boy with his body. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he ignored it, cradling the terrified child as the ball bounced harmlessly into a ditch. "Are you okay, kid?" Jake asked, his voice rough but gentle. The boy, wide-eyed and trembling, nodded. "My ball," he whispered, his voice breaking. Jake chuckled, despite the throbbing in his arm. "Forget the ball. You're a lot harder to replace." A car screeched to a halt nearby, and a woman in heels and a tailored dress ran toward them. Her face was a mixture of fear and relief. "Tommy!" she cried, dropping to her knees and pulling the boy into her arms. Jake stood, brushing off the gravel embedded in his jeans. His shoulder ached, but he waved it off as nothing. "He's fine," he assured her. "Just a little shaken up." The woman looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't even know how to thank you. You saved my son's life." Jake shrugged, his usual stoic demeanor returning. "Anybody would have done the same." "Not everybody," she countered, her tone firm yet filled with gratitude. "Please, at least let me—" Jake raised a hand to stop her. No need. Just keep an eye on him near the road. Kids don't always see danger coming. The boy, still clutching his mother's hand, looked up at Jake with a mix of awe and curiosity. Are you a superhero? Jake laughed, a sound that felt foreign even to him. Not quite, kid. Just a guy who knows how to run. The woman stood, her polished exterior momentarily cracking to reveal vulnerability. My name's Emily, by the way, and this little daredevil is Tommy. I owe you more than I can say. Jake, he replied simply, tipping his head, and you don't owe me a thing. As Emily tried to press further, Jake glanced at the garage, his sanctuary calling. Him back. Take care of him, he said, nodding toward Tommy before turning to leave. Emily watched him go, her gratitude mingling with curiosity. There was something about Jake, his rugged kindness, the way he seemed to carry a weight invisible to others. As she and Tommy walked back to their car, she couldn't shake the image of the man who had risked his life without hesitation, then walked away as if it were nothing. Back inside the garage, Jake sat on an old stool, cradling his aching shoulder. He replayed the moment in his mind, not the truck or the danger, but the boy's wide, trusting eyes and the woman's quiet gratitude. It stirred something in him, a flicker of life he hadn't felt in years. Jake shook his head, muttering under his breath. Don't get attached, he warned himself, reaching for a wrench to distract his thoughts. But the impression Emily and Tommy left lingered, an unspoken reminder that even in his self-imposed isolation, the world had a way of breaking through. As Jake returned to his quiet garage, he couldn't shake the feeling that this brief encounter with Emily and Tommy was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. The distant hum of city traffic was muffled inside the luxurious walls of Emily's home. The house stood proud and immaculate in an upscale neighborhood, every inch meticulously decorated. Yet, beneath its polished surface, it was a place where silence often hung heavy. Emily sat at the edge of her plush white sofa, her laptop open, but untouched. Her gaze drifted to the clock on the wall. It was nearing 9 p.m., and she had just returned from another exhausting day at the office. Tommy's faint voice echoed from the hallway, bringing her back to the moment. "Mommy, can I show you my drawing?" he called, his small footsteps padding closer. Emily smiled, though it was tinged with guilt. "Of course, sweetheart. What did you draw today?" Tommy climbed onto the couch beside her, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. It was a crude sketch of a garage, complete with tools and a man standing tall with a wrench in his hand. Emily's chest tightened. "Is that the man who helped you?" she asked, brushing her fingers over his hair. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "His name is Jake. He's really cool, Mommy. He fixed a car and said he's not a superhero, but I think he is." Emily's smile faltered. Jake had indeed been remarkable that day, but her thoughts were consumed by what could have happened if he hadn't acted so quickly. She pulled Tommy closer, kissing the top of his head. "He sounds like a good man." "He is," Tommy said, his voice certain. "Can I see him again?" Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. Jake had been kind and selfless, but she couldn't ignore the fact that he was a stranger. And yet, something about him, the way he carried himself, the sincerity in his actions, lingered in her thoughts. Across town, Jake sat on an old wooden chair in his garage. The space, lit by a single flickering bulb, was cluttered, but oddly comforting. A photograph of his late wife, Sarah, was pinned to the corkboard above his workbench. Her smile was as warm and radiant as the day they had taken that photo at the park, a lifetime ago. Jake reached for a wrench, but his hand paused. Midway, the memory of Tommy's wide-eyed innocence and Emily's genuine gratitude played in his mind like a film reel. He hadn't felt that kind of connection in years. "Get a grip, Jake," he muttered to himself. It was just one moment. Nothing's changed. But deep down, he knew that wasn't entirely true. That brief encounter had stirred something. In him, a flicker of life where there had once been only stillness. He glanced at the photo of Sarah. "You'd tell me to stop hiding, wouldn't you?" he whispered. But the silence of the garage offered no answers, only the hum of crickets outside. Meanwhile, Emily sat in her home office, a stack of contracts in front of her. Her real estate firm was on shaky ground, and every decision felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. The divorce had left her more than just emotionally drained. It had fractured her finances, and rebuilding had been an uphill battle ever since. A knock on the door startled her. Tommy peeked in, clutching his stuffed bear. "Mommy, can you read me a story?" Emily glanced at the clock, and then at the pile of work before her. Guilt swirled in her stomach as she forced a smile. "Just give me 10 more minutes, okay?" Tommy's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay," he whispered, before disappearing down the hallway. Emily exhaled deeply, her heart aching. She wanted to be there for Tommy, to give him the attention he deserved, but there never seemed to be enough hours in the day. Her thoughts drifted back to Jake. Somehow, in the briefest of moments, he had managed to connect with Tommy in a way she struggled to. The next morning, as Emily prepared Tommy's breakfast, she caught him humming a little tune while coloring another picture of Jake and his garage. "Tommy," she said, breaking the silence, "you really like Jake, don't you?" Tommy looked up with bright eyes. "He's the best, Mommy. He's strong and nice. He saved me." Emily stirred her coffee, the steam curling upward as she considered her next words. She had spent the night replaying the moment she met Jake. His rough exterior couldn't hide the kindness in his actions. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to know more about the man who had left such an impression on her son, and, if she were honest, on her as well. As Emily made her way to the small garage on the edge of town, she couldn't shake the feeling that this visit might uncover more than she bargained for. The small bell above the garage door jingled softly, signaling a visitor. Jake looked up from under the hood of a rusted sedan, his hands black with grease. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the sight of Emily and Tommy standing hesitantly in the doorway caught him off guard. "Hope we're not interrupting," Emily said, offering a polite smile. She looked striking in a casual blazer and jeans, a far cry from the tailored dress she'd worn the day they met. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on an already stained rag. "No, not at all," he replied, though his voice carried a hint of unease. He wasn't used to visitors, especially ones dressed as sharply as Emily. "Mom said we could come see your garage," Tommy piped up, his excitement cutting through Jake's wariness. The boy's eyes sparkled as they roamed over the tools. Car parts and half-finished projects scattered throughout the space. "Well, it's not much to look at," Jake said, scratching the back of his neck. "But you're welcome to take a look around." Tommy darted forward, drawn to a toolbox that sat open on the workbench. Jake chuckled softly, crouching beside him. "Careful there, buddy. Some of these tools are heavier than they look." "What's this one?" Tommy asked, pointing to a long-handled wrench. "That's a torque wrench," Jake explained. "It helps tighten bolts to just the right amount so they don't come loose or get damaged." Tommy's mouth formed an impressed "Oh." Emily watched from a few steps away, her arms crossed loosely. She noticed how Jake's rough exterior seemed to soften around her son, his gruff tone giving way to a surprising gentleness. "Do you fix cars all day?" Tommy asked, looking up at Jake with wide-eyed curiosity. "Pretty much," Jake replied. "I used to work on bigger machines, though. Airplanes." "Airplanes?" Tommy's voice rose in amazement. "That's so cool! Why don't you fix them anymore?" Jake hesitated, glancing briefly at Emily before returning his focus to Tommy. "Sometimes life takes you in a different direction," he said simply, his tone carrying a weight the boy couldn't quite grasp. Emily lingered near the garage door, her eyes sweeping over the space. It was far from pristine, but there was a certain charm in its organized chaos. The shelves were lined with jars of screws and bolts, each carefully labeled in Jake's neat handwriting. A faded calendar from years past hung on the wall next to a photo of an airplane in mid-flight. Her gaze shifted back to Jake. There was something compelling about him, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the subtle kindness in his interactions. With Tommy, in her world of boardrooms and business deals, genuine people like Jake were rare. "Jake," Emily said, drawing his attention, "you really don't mind us being here?" He straightened and shrugged. "Not at all. Tommy's a good kid, curious." She smiled, her expression softening. "That he is. And he hasn't stopped talking about you since the other day." Jake rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost embarrassed. "I didn't do much, just glad he's okay." As the visit stretched on, Jake found himself surprisingly at ease. Tommy's endless questions and bright enthusiasm reminded him of a younger version of himself, curious, eager to learn, and unburdened by the weight of the world. Before he knew it, he was teaching Tommy how to check the oil in one of the cars. "This stick tells you how much oil is left," Jake explained, pulling the dipstick from the engine and holding it out for Tommy to see. "See the line? That's where it should be." Tommy nodded solemnly, his small hands gripping the dipstick as if it were a precious artifact. Emily chuckled from behind them, pulling her phone out to snap a photo of the moment. "You've got a knack with kids," she said, her voice warm. Jake shrugged, though her words touched something in him. "I guess I just talk to them like they're people." When it was time to leave, Emily hesitated at the door. "Jake, would you let us treat you to dinner sometime? As a thank you for everything." Jake stiffened, his gaze dropping to the floor. "That's kind of you, but I'm not really the dinner-out type." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a meal. You deserve it." "I appreciate the offer," Jake said, his tone firm but polite. "But I'm good, really." Emily nodded, sensing that pushing further would only make him retreat. "Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands." "Thanks," Jake replied, his lips curving into a small, almost shy smile. As they stepped outside, Tommy tugged at Jake's sleeve. "Wait, I forgot something." He dug into his backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. On it was a crayon drawing of Jake standing next to a car, with "Jake is a hero" scrawled in bold letters at the top. "I made this for you," Tommy said, beaming. Jake took the drawing, his rough hands handling it as if it were fragile. He stared at it for a moment, then looked down at Tommy. "Thanks, kid, I'll put it somewhere special." As Emily and Tommy walked away, Jake stood in the doorway, the picture still in his hand. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Maybe hope. Despite Jake's resistance to dinner, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story, and she wasn't the only one curious. The soft hum of the radio played in the background as Jake tightened the bolts on a car's engine. The steady rhythm of his work usually brought him peace, but today his mind wandered. Emily had left the garage earlier that week, and yet her words and presence lingered like an echo in his quiet world. He set down his tools as the sound of approaching footsteps broke his focus. Looking up, he saw Emily standing in the doorway, her face framed by the fading light of the evening. She held a thermos in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. "I thought you might appreciate a break," she said with a small smile. Stepping inside, Jake wiped his hands on a rag, nodding toward the nearest stool. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she replied simply, setting the thermos and bag on the workbench. "It's just coffee and a sandwich. Nothing." "Fancy?" Jake hesitated, then reached for the thermos. "Thanks," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. He poured himself a cup of coffee and took a cautious sip, the warmth seeping through the coldness he often carried. As they sat in the dimly lit garage, Emily looked around, her eyes landing on the corkboard above Jake's workbench. The photo of the airplane caught her attention first, but her gaze shifted to another image, a younger Jake standing beside a smiling woman. "Is that your wife?" she asked gently. Jake's hand froze mid-motion, his eyes following hers to the photo. A heavy silence hung between them before he nodded. "Yeah, that's Sarah." Emily hesitated, unsure if she should press further. But when Jake spoke again, his tone was surprisingly steady. "She was everything," he said, his voice tinged with both fondness and pain. "Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. We met in college. I was studying engineering and she was studying me, mostly." He chuckled softly, the sound more bittersweet than joyful. Emily smiled, sensing the love that still lingered in his words. "What happened to her?" Jake's gaze dropped to the cup in his hands. "Cancer," he said after a long pause. "It came fast and didn't give us much time. She made me promise to keep going, but after she was gone, I couldn't. The career, the ambition, it all felt empty without her." Emily's heart ached for him. "So you came here," she said, more a statement than a question. Jake nodded. "Needed a place where people didn't know me. Somewhere quiet. The garage. It became my escape." Emily sipped her own coffee, the warmth grounding her as memories of her own past surfaced. "I think I understand what you mean about needing an escape," she said, her voice soft. Jake looked at her, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "How so?" Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "My ex-husband," she began, the words heavy on her tongue. "He wasn't a bad person, not at first. He was charming, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. But as time went on, that charm became control. Everything had to be his way. My career, my friends, even how I raised Tommy. It all became something he tried to dictate." Jake's jaw tightened, his own hands curling into fists at her words. "Why'd you stay?" "For a long time I told myself it was for Tommy," Emily admitted, "that he needed a stable home, even if it wasn't a happy one. But eventually, I realized that staying was doing more harm than good, so I left." "I started over," Jake nodded, his respect for her growing with every word. "That takes guts." Emily gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Some days I wonder if it was courage or just desperation." "It was both," Jake said firmly, "and that's nothing to be ashamed of." As the two continued to talk, a small figure lingered in the shadows outside the garage. Tommy had come looking for his mom, but stopped short when he heard the low murmur of voices. He wasn't a bad person, but everything had to be his way. Emily's voice drifted to his ears. Tommy frowned, his young mind trying to piece together the fragments of the conversation. He edged closer, peeking through the open door. Inside, he saw Jake leaning forward, his expression serious as he listened to Emily. There was something about the way they talked, the way they seemed so comfortable together, that sent a pang of fear through Tommy. Was Jake trying to take his dad's place? The thought made his chest tighten. He liked Jake. He really did. But he didn't want to lose the memories of his father, no matter how faint they were. Later that night, as Emily tucked Tommy into bed, she noticed the way he clung to his stuffed bear a little tighter than usual. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" she asked, smoothing his hair. Tommy hesitated, his small face scrunching in thought. "Mommy," he finally said, "do you like Jake?" Emily blinked, surprised by the question. "Well, I think Jake is a very nice man. Why do you ask?" Tommy looked down, fiddling with the edge of his blanket. "I don't want him to be my dad," he whispered. The words hit Emily like a weight to her chest. She sat down beside him, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Oh, Tommy," she said softly, "Jake isn't trying to replace your dad. No one could ever take his place. You know that, right?" Tommy nodded, but the uncertainty in his eyes lingered as Emily kissed his forehead and turned out the light. She couldn't shake the feeling that their growing bond with Jake had introduced not just hope, but also new complexities to navigate. As Tommy's unease simmered beneath the surface, Emily found herself wondering if Jake's quiet life was as simple as it seemed, or if the shadows of his past still lingered. The warm summer sunlight filtered through the windows of Emily's kitchen as she poured a glass of orange juice for Tommy. He sat quietly at the table, drawing on a scrap of paper. Normally, he'd be chattering about his day or asking for help with his crayons, but this morning he was unusually quiet. Emily couldn't ignore the heavy silence that filled the room. "Tommy," she said gently, sitting down across from him. "You've been awfully quiet lately. Is something on your mind?" Tommy shrugged, his small hands clutching the crayon a little tighter. "No." Emily frowned, sensing there was more to it. "Is it about Jake?" she ventured, watching his reaction carefully. Tommy froze for a moment before looking up, his lips pressed into a tight line. "I don't want him to be my dad," he blurted out, his voice small but firm. Emily's breath caught. She set her glass down, leaning closer. "To him. Oh, sweetheart," she began. "Jake isn't trying to take your dad's place." Tommy shook his head, his eyes filling with tears. "But you like him, and you talk to him a lot. What if you forget about Daddy?" The weight of his words settled heavily on Emily's chest. She reached out, placing a comforting hand over his. "Tommy, I could never forget about your dad, and neither could you. He's always going to be a part of us." "But Jake—" Tommy hesitated, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "He's not like Daddy." "No, he's not," Emily agreed softly, "and that's okay. Jake isn't here to replace your dad. He's just someone who cares about us, and someone we can care about too." Later that afternoon, Emily pulled up to Jake's garage with Tommy in tow. The boy dragged his feet as they approached the open bay doors, his reluctance clear in every step. Jake was under the hood of a truck, his face obscured by the brim of his cap. He looked up as they entered, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "Hey there," he greeted, his tone warm but cautious. He immediately noticed Tommy's hesitance and cast a questioning look at Emily. "Jake," Emily began, her voice steady, "I think you and Tommy need to talk." Jake straightened, setting the rag aside. He crouched down to meet Tommy's eye level, his expression kind but serious. "What's on your mind, kid?" Tommy shuffled his feet, avoiding Jake's gaze. "I don't want you to be my dad," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Jake tilted his head, his brows knitting together. "Tommy," he said gently, "I'm not here to take your dad's place. No one could ever do that." Tommy's head shot up, his eyes wide. "But Mommy talks to you all the time, and you're always nice to me. It's like you're trying to— I'm trying to be your friend," Jake interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "That's all. I know how much your dad means to you, and I'd never want to take that away." Tommy blinked, processing Jake's words. "You won't forget about him?" "Not a chance," Jake assured him. "In fact, if you ever want to talk about him, I'd love to hear all the stories you remember. He sounds like he was a great guy." Tommy's shoulders relaxed slightly, a small glimmer of trust returning to his eyes. "He was," he said softly. "He used to read me stories before bed." Jake smiled. "Sounds like a pretty awesome dad." As the conversation went on, Tommy's initial resistance began to melt away. Jake's honest and straightforward approach seemed to reach him in a way that no one else could. By the time they left the garage, Tommy was clutching a small wrench Jake had given him as a keepsake. In the car, Emily glanced at her son through the rearview mirror. "Feeling better?" she asked. Tommy nodded, a faint smile on his face. "Jake's not so bad," he admitted. Emily chuckled softly, relief washing over her. "I'm glad you think so." That evening, as Jake sat alone in his garage, he replayed the conversation with Tommy in his mind. The boy's words had struck a chord, forcing Jake to confront something he hadn't fully acknowledged, his growing connection to both Tommy and Emily. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. For the first time in years, he felt like he was becoming a part of something bigger. Jake leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo of his late wife on the corkboard. "Sarah," he murmured, "I think I might be ready to let people in again." While Jake began to embrace his growing bond with Emily and Tommy, neither of them could foresee the storm that was about to disrupt their fragile new connection. The clatter of a phone hitting the kitchen counter startled Emily. She stared at the screen, her pulse quickening as she read the name on the caller ID, Mark Caldwell, her ex-husband. It had been over a year since their divorce was finalized, but the sound of his voice on the other end of the line still carried an unsettling weight. She hesitated before picking up. "Mark," she said, her tone cold but controlled. "Emily," he replied, his voice smooth yet tinged with smugness. "I thought it was time we talked." "About what?" she asked, though the knot forming in her stomach already hinted at the answer. "About Tommy," he said, matter-of-factly. "I've been thinking maybe it's time I took on a more active role in his life, a stable home, the kind of environment only I can provide." Emily's grip tightened on the phone. "Tommy has a stable home. With me." "What are you really trying to say?" "Mark, I'm saying I'll be filing for custody," he said, his tone casual, as if he were discussing the weather. "I've already spoken to my lawyers." Emily's heart dropped. "You're doing this out of spite, aren't you? You don't care about Tommy, you just want control." "You're free to think what you like," Mark replied smoothly, "but I'm sure the courts will see things my way, especially given your recent choices." "What are you talking about?" she demanded, though she could already sense where this was heading. "Oh, come now, Emily," he said with a mocking chuckle. "This mechanic you've been spending time with, do you think that kind of man is fit to be around my son?" Emily's chest tightened with anger. "Jake has nothing to do with this, and you have no right to judge him or me." Mark's voice turned icy. "We'll see what the judge has to say about that." Later that day, Emily paced the living room, her thoughts racing. The weight of Mark's threats hung over her like a storm cloud. She glanced at Tommy, who was happily building a Lego tower on the floor, blissfully unaware of the battle brewing around him. She couldn't let Mark take him. Not now. Not ever. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a text. From Jake. "Everything okay? Haven't heard from you in a bit." Emily hesitated before replying. "Can we talk? It's complicated." Within an hour, she was at Jake's garage, the familiar hum of machinery offering a strange sense of comfort. Jake was working under the hood of a car but straightened when he saw her walk in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, concern etched into his face. "It's Mark," Emily said, her voice shaking. "He's threatening to take Tommy." Jake set his tools aside, his posture tensing. "What? Why now?" Emily explained the phone call, her words spilling out in a rush. Jake listened intently, his jaw tightening with every detail. "What can I do?" he asked when she finished, his voice steady but determined. Emily hesitated. "I don't know. He's already started putting pressure on my company. He's buying out contracts, cutting off my resources. If I can't keep things running, he'll use that against me." Jake frowned, his mind already working through the problem. "What if I help with the cars at your office? Maintenance, repairs, whatever it takes to cut down your costs." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the offer. "Jake, that's a lot to ask." He shook his head. "You didn't ask. I'm offering. You're not fighting this alone, Emily." Her eyes softened, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "Thank you, Jake. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Jake gave her a small smile. "You don't need to. Let's just focus on keeping Tommy where he belongs." As the days passed, Jake threw himself into the work, servicing Emily's fleet of vehicles with the same precision and care he brought to everything he did. Word spread quickly among her employees, and soon even clients were taking notice of the small-town mechanic who seemed to be everywhere at once. Meanwhile, Mark wasn't idle. He began digging into Jake's past, searching for anything he could, used to paint him as unfit. The more he uncovered about Jake's reclusive life, the more ammunition he believed he had. At the same time, Emily and Jake grew closer. Late-night conversations over coffee became a regular occurrence, their shared determination to protect Tommy forging an unspoken bond. Jake found himself opening up about his late wife more often, while Emily confided in him about the weight of her struggles with Mark. "You've been through a lot," Jake said one evening, his voice low. "But you're still standing. That says something." Emily smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes it feels like I'm barely holding on." "You're stronger than you think," Jake replied firmly, "and you're not alone in this." One evening, as Jake locked up the garage, he noticed a car idling just down the street. The silhouette of the driver was familiar. Too familiar. Mark Caldwell. Jake's fists clenched as the man stepped out of the vehicle, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Jake," Mark said smoothly, his smile dripping with false friendliness. "I thought it was time we met." Jake didn't reply, his instincts telling him this wasn't a social call. "I've heard a lot about you," Mark continued, his tone deceptively casual. "Emily seems to think you're quite the hero, but we both know that every hero has a flaw." Jake's jaw tightened. "If you've got something to say, just say it," Mark smirked. "I just wanted to let you know I'm very good at finding flaws, and when I do, I'll make sure everyone sees them." With that, Mark turned and walked back to his car, leaving Jake standing in the shadows, his mind racing. As Mark's threats loomed larger, Jake knew he would have to confront not just his past, but the man determined to use it against him. The morning air was crisp as Jake stepped outside, locking up the garage for the day. He noticed something unusual, a couple of neighbors standing nearby, whispering. They shot him sideways glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. Jake frowned but shrugged it off, assuming it was nothing more than idle gossip. Yet as the day unfolded, the strange looks and hushed conversations followed him wherever he went. By the time the lunch hour rolled around, Jake's patience was wearing thin. At the local diner, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his stomach churn. "Heard he's got a criminal record. Probably why he hides in that old garage of his. I wouldn't let my kids near him." Jake's grip tightened on the coffee cup in his hand. He could feel the stares pressing against his back, the weight of judgment heavy and suffocating. When he returned to the garage, his phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "Call me when you can. It's important." Jake dialed her number immediately. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tense. Emily's voice on the other end was filled with equal parts anger and concern. "It's Mark. He's been spreading lies about you, saying you've got a criminal past, that you're dangerous." Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I figured as much. People have been looking at me like I'm some kind of monster all day." "I'm so sorry, Jake," Emily said, her voice softening. "This is my fault. He's trying to use you to get to me." Jake shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. "It's not your fault. Mark's the one pulling the strings." "But it's you who's paying the price," Emily said. "I won't let him ruin your reputation, Jake. I'll do something about this." Later that evening, the town held a community meeting at the local hall. Jake wasn't planning to attend, but when Emily called him insisting he come, he reluctantly agreed. The hall was buzzing with chatter when they arrived, the air thick with tension. Emily stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention. She raised her hand to quiet the murmurs, her voice firm as she addressed the crowd. "I understand there have been some rumors about Jake," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, "and I want to set the record straight." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Jake is one of the most selfless and kind-hearted people I've ever met," she continued. "He saved my son's life, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. He's helped me in more ways than I can count, and he's been nothing but a positive influence on this community." Someone in the back muttered something under their breath, but Emily didn't falter. "If you've heard anything that suggests otherwise, I can assure you it's not true. I trust Jake completely, and I think it's time we all start giving him the respect he deserves." The murmurs started again, but this time they carried a different tone. Several people nodded in agreement, while others looked contemplative. Jake, who had been standing at the back of the room, felt a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in this way. But as he looked around, he saw familiar faces, people he'd helped over the years, neighbors he'd quietly supported without expecting anything in return. One by one, they began to speak up. "He fixed my car for free when I couldn't afford it. He helped my son learn how to change a tire. He's always been good to me and my family." By the end of the meeting, the tide had turned. The rumors, once sharp and cutting, were now blunted by the voices of those who knew Jake for who he truly was. That night, as Jake walked Emily back to her car, he finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Emily said firmly. "Mark might be trying to tear you down, but I won't let him. You've done too much good to let his lies win." Jake gave her a small smile, his usual stoic demeanor softening. "Thanks, Emily. That meant more than I can say." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, her tone half serious. "Mark won't stop here. He's going to keep pushing." Jake's smile faded, replaced by a determined look. "Then it's time I stopped him." Emily's brows knit together. "What do you mean?" Jake met her gaze, his expression resolute. "I'm not just going to sit back and let him drag my name through the mud. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one." As Jake prepared to confront Mark, he knew that standing up for himself would mean facing not only the lies, but the ghosts of his past he'd tried so hard to leave behind. The garage was eerily quiet as Jake leaned against the workbench, his thoughts swirling like a storm. He stared at the photograph of Sarah pinned to the corkboard, her warm smile a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in his life. Mark's threats, the rumors, and the sudden scrutiny had pushed him to a breaking point. For years, Jake had chosen a life of quiet isolation, but now it seemed that life was no longer an option. The sound of a car pulling up snapped him out of his thoughts. Emily stepped out, her expression a mix of determination and concern. "You said you wanted to talk?" she asked, walking into the garage. Jake nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, I've made a decision." As they sat across from each other in the office corner of the garage, Jake took a deep breath. "I'm done letting people like Mark call the shots in my life," he began. "For too long, I've been hiding. Here, just getting by. But I'm not doing that anymore." Emily tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What are you saying, Jake?" "I'm saying it's time to expand," he said firmly. "This garage, it's my livelihood. But it can be more than that. I want to turn it into something bigger, something better, a place where people can rely on quality work and where I can give back to this town." Emily's lips curved into a smile, her admiration for him growing. "That's an incredible idea, Jake, but it won't be easy. Expansion means money, permits, marketing." "I know," he interrupted gently, "and I know it's a risk. But I'm tired of playing it safe." Emily leaned forward, her voice soft but unwavering. "Then let me help you." Jake frowned, his first instinct to refuse. "Emily, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking," she replied. "I'm offering. You've been there for me and Tommy in ways I can't even begin to repay. This is something I want to do, not just for you, but because I believe in you." Her words hung in the air, their sincerity undeniable. For the first time in years, Jake felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Hope. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jake threw himself into planning the expansion with a focus and determination he hadn't felt in years. Emily, true to her word, connected him with local contacts to secure the permits and financing he needed. Her expertise as a businesswoman proved invaluable, and together they worked tirelessly to turn his vision into reality. One evening, as they sat side by side in the garage, poring over blueprints and spreadsheets, Jake glanced at Emily. I don't know how you do it, he said, shaking his head. You've got a company to run, Tommy to take care of, and now this. Emily smiled, a warmth in her gaze that made Jake's chest tighten. You don't give yourself enough credit. You've done more for me than you realize, Jake. Still, he said, his voice softening, I couldn't have done this without you. Her smile widened, but before she could reply, Tommy burst into the garage, holding a sheet of paper. Mom! Jake! Look what I drew! They both leaned over to see a colorful sketch of a new garage, complete with a bright sign that read, Jake's Garage 2.0. Jake chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. Looks like you've got my expansion plans all figured out. Tommy beamed. Can I work here when I grow up? You can start right now, Jake said with a grin. Plenty of wrenches that need organizing. As Tommy set to work, Emily and Jake exchanged a look, unspoken gratitude passing between them. The turning point came when Jake secured a major contract with a regional transportation company. The deal would not only provide a steady stream of business, but also cement his reputation as a reliable and skilled mechanic. Signing the contract felt surreal, a culmination of weeks of effort and years of untapped potential. Standing outside the garage that evening, Jake looked up at the stars, the weight of the contract in his hand. Emily joined him, her presence, a comforting steadiness. You did it, she said simply, her voice filled with pride. We did it, Jake corrected, his tone gentle. This wouldn't have happened without you. Emily placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but grounding. You've always had it in you, Jake. I just helped you see it. He turned to her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. Thank you, Emily, for everything. The moment stretched between them, the air thick with unspoken emotions. But before either could say more, Tommy called from the doorway, holding a wrench triumphantly. Jake, I fixed the toolbox. Jake laughed, the sound rich and full of life. Guess I've got some competition, he said, winking at Emily. As Jake celebrated his newfound success, shadows from his past began to resurface, threatening the fragile new life he was building. The garage was unusually quiet that evening. Jake sat alone at his workbench, staring at the small wooden box in his hands. It was a keepsake he hadn't touched in years, tucked away in the farthest corner of his storage cabinet. Inside were memories of a life he had tried to leave behind, photographs, handwritten notes, and a wedding ring that no longer held its place on his finger. The success of his new contract had brought congratulations from the entire town, but Jake felt strangely disconnected from it all. As he ran his fingers over the edge of the box, guilt clawed at him. His late wife, Sarah, had been his world. How could he allow himself to feel something for Emily without betraying her memory? The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Emily stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the garage lights. Jake, she called softly, her voice laced with concern. He looked up, startled. Emily, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, she said, stepping closer. You've been distant all day. Is everything okay? Jake hesitated, his eyes flicking back to the box. I'm fine, he lied, though his tone betrayed him. Emily followed his gaze, her eyes landing on the box. She approached cautiously, sensing the weight of the moment. What's that? She asked gently. Jake exhaled, the words coming slowly. Memories of Sarah, my wife. They sat together on the worn-out stools by the workbench, the box open between them. Jake began to speak, his voice low and uneven. We were married for 6 years. She was everything to me. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. When she got sick, I thought I could fix it, like fixing a car, but life doesn't work that way. Emily listened intently, her heart aching for him. I'm so sorry, Jake. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. She made me promise to move on, to live my life. But after she died, I couldn't. I left everything behind, my career, my friends. The garage became my escape, a place where I didn't have to face the world. Emily reached out, placing a hand over his. And now? Jake met her gaze, his eyes filled with turmoil. Now, I don't know. Being with you and Tommy, it feels right, but it also feels wrong, like I'm betraying her. Emily's expression softened, her voice steady and reassuring. Jake, loving someone new doesn't mean you've stopped loving her. It doesn't erase what you had, it adds to it. Sarah will always be a part of you, just like Tommy's dad will always be a part of him. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve happiness now. Jake's shoulders sagged as her words sank in. It's just hard to let go, he admitted. You don't have to let go, Emily said, but you do have to let yourself live. And from what I've seen, Sarah would have wanted that for you. Jake looked down at the wedding ring in the box, its metal worn from years of wear. Slowly, he closed the lid, his grip steady. She would have, he murmured, more to himself than to Emily. The conversation shifted, the heaviness giving way to a quieter, more reflective mood. Jake spoke about his dreams of expanding the garage further, creating a place where young mechanics could learn and grow. Emily shared her vision for her company, how she wanted to use it to support families, like hers, ones who had weathered storms and come out stronger. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt a flicker of hope that didn't come with guilt. Emily's presence was steady, her words grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. You've given me more than you realize, Emily, he said, quietly. For the first time in years, I'm starting to feel whole. Emily smiled, her hand still resting lightly on his. You've given me something too, Jake, a chance to believe in someone again. As the evening wore on, Jake found himself walking Emily to her car. Tommy had fallen asleep in the back seat, his small form curled up with his favorite stuffed. A bear. Jake leaned against the car door, his expression thoughtful. Emily, he began, his voice steady. I've been holding back because I was scared. Scared of what it would mean to move forward. But I'm done running. I want to build something real with you and Tommy. Emily's eyes softened, a mixture of surprise and warmth. Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, you already have. Back inside the garage, Jake returned to the workbench, the small wooden box still sitting there. But instead of opening it, he moved it to the shelf, placing it carefully. Among his other keepsakes, it wasn't about forgetting, it was about making room for the future. As Jake embraced the possibility of a new future, he couldn't shake the feeling that life still had one final test in store for him. The hum of activity around Jake's garage was a stark contrast to the quiet, solitary days he had once known. Cars lined the lot, neighbors chatted while waiting for their vehicles, and laughter echoed as Jake worked alongside a few young apprentices he'd recently taken under his wing. What had once been a modest one-man operation had transformed into a bustling community hub. Jake wiped his hands on a rag, stepping back to admire the progress of the day. His apprentices, teenagers eager to learn, had taken to calling the garage Jake's School of Hard Knocks. The name made him chuckle, though he took pride in their growth. Emily arrived just as Jake finished tightening the last bolt on a client's car. She stepped out of her car with a tray of coffee in hand, her polished yet approachable demeanor catching the attention of everyone nearby. Bringing fuel for the hardest working crew in town, she called out, smiling. Jake met her halfway, taking the tray and shooting her a grateful look. You spoil us, he teased. Emily shrugged, her eyes sparkling. Someone has to. Tommy hopped out of the car, racing toward Jake. Jake, guess what? I got an A on my science project. Jake crouched down, giving the boy a high five. That's awesome, buddy. What was the project about? Engines, Tommy said excitedly. I told my class all about what you taught me, and they thought it was so cool. Jake's chest swelled with pride. You're a natural, kid. Keep it up, and you'll be running this place in no time. That evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Jake closed the garage for the day. Emily and Tommy stayed behind, the three of them sharing a quiet dinner on the picnic table outside. The air was filled with the smell of grilled burgers, the sound of crickets, and the occasional burst of laughter from Tommy as Jake recounted a story about his early days as a mechanic. After Tommy wandered off to chase fireflies, Emily leaned closer to Jake. You know, she began, her voice soft, what you've built here. It's incredible. Jake shrugged, though a small smile tugged at his lips. I had help. Emily reached for his hand, her touch light yet grounding. You had the vision, Jake, and the heart. That's what makes this place special. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, the connection between them stronger than words could convey. Finally, Jake stood, taking a deep breath as if bracing himself. Emily, he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. There's something I've been wanting to say. Emily tilted her head, her expression curious but calm. What is it? Jake reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. He opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. I've spent so much of my life running, from my past, from my feelings, from people who cared about me. But meeting you and Tommy, it changed everything. You reminded me what it means to have a family, to have hope. And I don't want to lose that. He dropped to one knee, his eyes meeting hers. Emily, will you marry me? For a moment, Emily was speechless. Tears welled in her eyes, and her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Jake, at the man who had risked his life for her son, who had shown her kindness and strength when she needed it most. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Then louder, yes, Jake, I will. Jake stood, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a warm embrace. Tommy, who had been watching from a distance, came running over. What happened? Why is Mom crying? Emily crouched down, holding Tommy's hands. Jake asked me to marry him, she said, her voice filled with joy, and I said yes. Tommy looked up at Jake, his face serious for a moment before breaking into a wide grin. Does that mean you'll be my dad? Jake crouched down to Tommy's level, placing a hand on his shoulder. Only if you'll have me, buddy. Tommy threw his arms around Jake's neck, squeezing tightly. You're already my dad, he said simply. Jake's throat tightened, and he held the boy close, overwhelmed by the depth of the moment. The night deepened. The three of them sat together under the stars, their future bright and full of promise. Jake looked at Emily and Tommy, his heart full in a way he hadn't thought possible. This was more than a new beginning. This was home. With their family now complete, Jake, Emily, and Tommy prepared to face the world together. But life had one final, unexpected surprise in store for them. The morning sun bathed the small-town church in a golden glow, its light filtering through the stained glass windows. Inside, rows of wooden pews were filled with familiar faces, friends, neighbors, and even former clients of Jake and Emily. The entire community had gathered to witness a moment none of them had expected, the marriage of Jake, the once reclusive mechanic, and Emily, the poised and determined businesswoman who had captured his heart. Tommy stood at the front, proudly holding the ring box. He wore a tiny suit and tie, his hair neatly combed for the occasion. As the soft strains of music filled the room, everyone turned to watch Emily enter. She glided down the aisle, her simple yet elegant white dress flowing behind her. Her smile was radiant, and her eyes shimmered with emotion as she looked at Jake, waiting for her at the altar. Jake's breath caught when he saw her. For a moment, the noise of the world faded, leaving only her presence. He had spent years living in the shadows of his past, but today, standing there with Emily and Tommy, he felt truly whole. The ceremony was intimate, yet filled with warmth. Vows were exchanged, each word carrying the weight of their journeys. Jake's voice wavered slightly as he looked into Emily's eyes. "I promise to honor the love we've built, to cherish this family we've created, and to never take a single moment for granted." Emily's response was steady, her tone filled with conviction. "You've given me a kind of strength and hope I thought I'd lost. I promise to stand beside you, to share in your dreams, and to build a future full of love and laughter." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in cheers and applause. Tommy threw his arms in the air, his grin as wide as the horizon. Jake scooped him up, holding him close as Emily joined them in an embrace. In that moment, they were more than a family. They were a testament to resilience, love, and second chances. The reception was held in the newly renovated garage, a space that now buzzed with life and energy. Strings of twinkling lights hung from the rafters, and tables were set up among the cars Jake and his apprentices had meticulously restored. A banner reading, "Congratulations, Jake and Emily," stretched across the wall, a symbol of how the garage had become more than a workplace. It was the heart of the community. Jake stood in the center of the room, holding a glass of sparkling cider as he prepared to address the crowd. The room quieted, every eye on him. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But there's something I need to say. For a long time I thought I didn't deserve a second chance at happiness. I let my past keep me from moving forward. But then two people walked into my life and reminded me what it means to feel alive again." He glanced at Emily and Tommy, his voice softening. "Emily, you've shown me a strength and grace I didn't know I needed. And Tommy, you've reminded me how to laugh, how to dream. You're the reason this place feels like home." The room erupted in applause as Jake raised his glass. "To family, because at the end of the day, that's what matters most." As the evening wore on, Jake led Emily and Tommy outside. Together, they stood beneath a new sign freshly mounted above the garage doors. It read, "Tommy's Garage, Emily." Looked at Jake, her brow arching in surprise. "Tommy's garage?" Jake grinned, ruffling Tommy's hair. "This place is as much his as it is ours. He's the reason I started believing in the future again." Tommy's eyes lit up, his small hands clutching Jake's. "Really?" "Really," Jake said, crouching down to meet his gaze. "You've got big dreams, kid, and I want this place to be part of them." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she took Jake's hand. "You never cease to amaze me." The three of them stood there, silhouetted against the glow of the garage lights. Around them, the sounds of laughter and celebration spilled out into the night. But in that moment, it felt as though time stood still. Jake looked at Emily and Tommy, his heart full to bursting. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, his voice filled with a promise. Emily nodded, leaning into him. "The best beginnings are the ones we build together." As they stood there under the stars and the sign that bore Tommy's name, one thing was certain. Their story wasn't just about finding a family. It was about building a life filled with love, hope, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. As the final chapter of Jake, Emily, and Tommy's journey comes to a close, we're reminded that life's greatest treasures often come from the connections we build, even in the most unexpected moments. Their story isn't just about finding love, it's about hope, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Did this story remind you of someone in your life, or perhaps inspire you in a way you didn't expect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them and can't wait to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales that celebrate the power of human connection. By subscribing, you'll join a community of people who believe in the beauty of storytelling and the impact of kindness. Thank you for taking the time to watch and be part of this journey with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to bring you more stories that touch the heart and soul. Until next time, take care and remember, the simplest acts of kindness can create the most extraordinary ripples. See you soon.